Hello, and this is Skip Ruddertail and
Toonses, the cat that can take public transportation.
And you are listening to episode 2 of the Bad Dog Book Club.
Also known as the second episode.
The second episode.
To some of us.
Today, we'll be discussing Double Blind by Teiran, which first appeared in Roar, Volume 2.
Mm-hmm. Unofficially known as Double Bling, because every time I try to type it, that's what I type.
We know what's on your mind. That's how you roll.
Well, now it sounds like a good phrase, and you're like, oh, that's double bling, yo. I mean, that's just not good. Like, bling simply itself is tired, but double bling might bring it back.
So, Toonses, you picked this story this week, so why don't you tell us what drew you to it?
Well, for our first podcast, we picked a story from Fang, Sanguine and Clockwork. I thought it was a good story, like an erotic story, but one that wasn't, just like a straightforward masturbatory piece. Something that was a bit more thoughtful, a bit deeper. I think a good way to start things off differently than you might expect from an erotic piece. And I thought it was a good idea to go the same route, kind of do the keep things symmetric with our second episode. And I asked Alex Vance if we can get a clean story from the Roar series. And I found this story, this kind of sci-fi thriller. I liked it because it was just a straightforward, kind of exciting, shoot 'em up, interesting thriller. I think it would be a good way to start out. I thought it was much more masturbatory than Sanguine and Clockwork was, because I imagine people reading these stories. No. Okay, so everybody gets off their own way, right? So some people, I think, go to action films. And they sit there going, oh my god, that gun, the details are so precise, and they're killing so many people. How can they even have this many people to kill? And they just sit back, and that's just how they enjoy themselves. And, you can enjoy yourself the same way with a story like this.
Okay.
That's the point I wanted to make, was something could be clean as, a sterile shelf, but be just as masturbatory as the worst erotica story.
All right.
In a good way, though.
That's good.
Because,
yeah.
That's what I...
Well, and, a quick thank you to Buck Turner, who's the editor for the Roar series, and we appreciate his help in this as well. And he'll hopefully be giving us... We have an upcoming volume very, very soon, and I think he'll be giving us a story from there so we can kind of give him a bump. I'd also... A quick other bump. I know some of you listeners, or I hope some of you listeners heard about us on Notcast, which is appropriate since Fuzz is one of the Notcasters, and we just like to give a shout back to them. You can check out Notcast at foxstuffers.com.
And now,
it's
for my
one of the best
version,
website addresses ever.
For my personal version of the shout-outs, which is called the Apologies,
yes.
On the last podcast, I got automaton completely wrong.
Right. I think we said it was too modern a word.
Yeah, and then he said it dates back to the 1650s or something like that. So I guess
it's just as old as homunculus. So I think
he might have said it might have predated it in some way. Or something.
Yeah.
At any rate, I had that completely wrong. I shouldn't use my amateur dictionary reading skills to pretend to be I'm an expert or something.
But that's good, So if you guys catch us, making a mistake, let us know. We're not too proud to cry a little. So
fake it till you make it.
Yep. All right.
That's what I think.
Okay, and once again, this is Double Blind by Teiran, and we want to give a special thank you to Teiran for letting us use this story. So thanks again, Teiran. You are awesome. And it was recorded by Alex, who loves doing these things and has a lovely voice. So thanks, Alex.
He got his head all filled up with his ego now.
Yes.
He got a wonderful comment.
That's Alex's natural state, actually.
But what did they say specifically? Something he was beaming about this. What was the comment he got? He sounds like somebody.
Oh, yeah. It's the guy who does the Harry Potter books on tapes, and he was compared to that gentleman, and I can't remember his name, though. So, Toon says, why don't you pick the story, so why don't you start us off with a discussion here?
One interesting thing I noticed, when I was reading the story, the interplay I was seeing was this difference between the things that were artificial versus the things that were natural. Generally, the difference between the magic and the technology. This is typified most generally in the two characters, Richard and Gina. Mm-hmm. Richard is the horse who has had more or less his body completely changed to this kind of chrome color with cybernetic attachments and upgrades and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And Gina is the magical ferret who, because of her connection with this magical world, which is, it's said in the story that it's your connection to the world powers or something like that. She cannot alter her body in any way to, get
or
these
it's risky
technological things.
too. The fear is that if she does,
she could potentially lose her magical powers.
Right.
So it kind of explicitly puts in the story this contrast between not like the good and evil that you have in the plot itself, but then below that, this difference between artificial and natural and how they relate to each other and what they do with each other. And I just thought that was interesting that when you consider the fact that the two characters who typify this are named Dick and Gina. I mean, come on.
Explain.
Am I the only person that noticed this? Come on. But I'm saying this is masturbatory, and come on, this is the stuff I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If this isn't intentional, it seeps through some degree, through some erotic osmosis.
Well, and I will add, as an anthropologist, that there's a wide, it's a debatable point, but there's a lot of literature that cross-culturally ties men to the cultural or technological realm, and women to a natural realm.
Indeed,
I think it's debatable, but it seems to be common across a lot of cultures, and so we may see that played out here, that we associate for various reasons, and I think the anthropological ones it's mostly to do with childbirth and early child raising, but that we associate women more strongly with the natural or world.
And specifically, they are presumed historically to have this special spiritual connection to whatever religious order their culture is a part of.
Mm-hmm.
That's the presumption. Then you have the connections there between like magic and religion and things like that as being a sort of supernatural spiritual force. But in the story, what does the magic actually accomplish in the story? Is it fills in the gaps where technology doesn't. I mean, this is a world, like a technotopic future, where technology has developed to the point where you can put a data port in your body to transfer photos and then just have them wireless go from head to head. It's a technological wonderland, essentially. But there are still, even in this world, some things that technology just can't quite cover. Such as in the beginning, during the opening scene they rush into the club where they need to have some time to run into the room and not be noticed. So they use the magic to put up a screen, like what is it? I don't want to say
basically sense blind. I think they're not noticed, they're not heard, they're not
specifically
seen.
If they look down there, it looks as if they're still making out.
Right.
They believe they still see them, kind of like a hologram, but clearly a hologram doesn't work in this case.
Right. But that was kind of one of my problems with the use of magic in this story. Actually, is that I don't know, I guess maybe I'm a little bit sentimental almost in terms of how I want to think about magic. But magic in this story was deployed with very concrete purposes. I'm going to use magic to accomplish X goal.
It was utilitarian.
Very utilitarian. And
the technology is handled the same way.
As you said, it was done to fill in gaps in technology. But, none of the things done with magic are things that at least I couldn't conceive of someday being done with sufficiently advanced technology. Which I guess goes back to that Arthur C. Clarke point that he always made, that, sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And maybe this builds on that a little bit. But I think that was sort of maybe a quibble I had almost, that I feel that magic should allow you to do things or go places, maybe even just mentally, that are more than technology can take you.
Well, Skip, I think the issue might be that in terms of the story and how the story is written, it seems as if magic is often used as a filler for when, writing-wise, it doesn't make quite sense to bring in technology. So it seems kind of like it's used as a glue for keeping the story together or flowing easily.
See, I don't know about that. I don't think you need magic in here at all.
Skip, what I like about this is it's a world where magic is dying. And that's why it's cool that it serves such a simple and even just quite utilitarian purpose.
Okay, well, maybe that's why it's there.
If you look at it at the end of the story, Gina's died.
Yes.
I believe the magical zebra on the other team has died.
I'm sorry, I just love that phrase.
The magical zebra?
The magical zebra.
On the other team.
It's my hippie album. Yeah.
The magical zebra on the other team. I said that with complete sincerity. I meant it, too.
Today on the magical zebra.
Oh my god, what this world has done to me.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, okay, metaphorically and literally in this story, magic is dying. Mm-hmm. And when you think of magic as being connected to not like the kind of old world order or religion specifically, there's some meaning to take out of that, I believe.
Except, isn't the most important object in the story magic?
It is.
Aha!
Yeah, but they're not even sure that it works. Mm-hmm. I mean, since magic returned to the world, I guess magic was gone and now it's back, whatever. Ever since it came back, they're trying to find this goblet, but they say in the story that they're not sure if it even works still. Right. And in the end, it was a MacGuffin.
Yes.
It was a MacGuffin. It was a red herring, whatever you want to call it.
Well, let me talk about this. Is a good term to know, all you writers
I set you
and readers. Yes. Well, I got to point it out to you earlier. The goblet is a classic MacGuffin. I mean, it's textbook, and that's a term that comes to us from Alfred Hitchcock. And maybe there's a little debate on, how it came about in one of his films. But basically, it's an object in a film or a story that motivates the characters in the story. But that's the extent of its importance. It doesn't actually... That's not what the story's about.
Like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
Right, the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, classic MacGuffin.
And people always want to know what's in it. It doesn't matter.
The Maltese Falcon is a classic MacGuffin. A Hitchcock example is in North by Northwest, where you've got Cary Grant running all over and people trying to kill him, and even Maurice Sank variously trying to kill him and save him. It's all for this microfilm. At no point do we learn what the microfilm has on it. But everybody's trying to get it, and that's why it's important. It motivates the characters. It gets them into certain situations where they may be in peril or, running into a lover, and that's the extent of it. And so this is a classic textbook MacGuffin. So I love it. My little writing and film geek went off on that one.
Oh, so we were saying like the zebra on the other team. Interesting, we just use it uses the phrase "other team" in the story. I highlighted that because it's such a competitive atmosphere in this dystopian future where corporate espionage has devolved to the point where you're sending rival teams out to try to collect magical goblets to get you the edge. And what was the name? It was Applied Dynamics or something like that. I was wondering if there's like a connection there.
It's one of these great faceless corporate names where they could be doing anything, and probably are.
Yes. Yeah. I thought General Dynamics was
like Amalgamated Consolidated Corporation or something.
Well, it reminds me of when I go on the metro and I see the ads, especially like Pentagon City Station, stuff like that, just for these things just sound so benign.
Yeah.
Like the best one was Palantir. And when I saw Palantir, it was all I could think, we're Palantir. You could be one too.
Yeah.
Because, consulting with the military-industrial complex is the thing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But they just, what on earth has Palantir ever had to do with killing people? But, whatever. So I was thinking Applied Dynamics would be like General Dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At any rate.
Yep.
But, everybody is like on a team and they're competing, and it reminded me, it's... When they brought out the gun, and there's this big-ass futuristic gun, this is what I wrote down this big-ass gun does. It's an assault rifle and a grenade launcher, which is to say, it has the basics for Halo. And by the way, then they did break off into teams of 5 and fight, so it was kind of like Social Slayer. Alright? That's what I'm arguing, but I'll drop the point. I'm just a Halo nerd. Okay. It has an advanced targeting computer, because everything has a computer nowadays. Why not? I'm sure guns do have computers, why wouldn't they? I'm sure they can use them. It can explode the grenades in mid-arc, which I guess that must mean the grenades have some kind of wireless receiver to them. Oh my goodness,
Bluetooth,
all this crazy stuff. Bluetooth, yeah, stuff you put in your ear. Great. And we can explode.
Just gotta make sure they're paired with the gun.
And it can be fired on full auto with no recoil. And whenever he gets a headshot, it uploads the picture to his Facebook profile.
Now, was that a joke?
Yes.
Yeah, but it was a good one.
Damn, I tried. But no, because he got this big-ass gun, and it does all these crazy things, and it just reminds me of
Toonses has a problem here with rustling the papers and clicking the pens and messing with his phone and all these things while we're trying to record. And I have some radio experience, so I'm constantly like...
I'm a dramatic,
bopping
person.
him. Yes, you're a fiddler. That's what you are.
You gotta keep me on a leash or something. Just keep my hands...
God help us if we ever get a Rubik's Cube in here. Alright. Yes.
Whatever.
So the gun, yeah.
The gun.
It was quite a gun.
But isn't this where technology would take us anyways? Having these just incredibly well-developed things for killing people.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what most of the technology in this is used for? I mean, they say at one point, the only real reference to consumer technology is that the fact that you can get these communication things in your ear or in your head implanted as well as you could, a piercing at the mall. But even then, that sounds kind of basic, and obviously these people are... getting technology that is much more expensive, much more specialized, and
well, we even have a character that's what he does with the money he gets. He goes and gets a new arm or an upgraded arm or other part, and there's a little joke there about what other parts one might get with technology. But yeah, I mean it's technology is literally, I mean, fetishized in this society. Is that it is for some of these people the end all and be all of existence.
Well, that's how it is today. I don't think it's any different than it is today. You still find people that have to have the latest social networking app on the most dependable phone, on the most broad-reaching telephone network, with the most tuned-in blogs, logged into the bookmarks. It has to
I know guys that, every 6 months when the new fastest video card in the world comes out for $600, they are there to buy it, even if it's only 10% faster than the 6-month-old one. They have to have it.
These are the people scrambling toward the singularity hive mind.
Yeah.
Like, they cannot wait for it to get here, and they think every video card I buy just because it's that much closer.
Get that much closer, yeah. No, I think, and it is this, world that they're living in, and that's what things... Teiran, I think, builds this world very carefully.
No, I agree.
One of the things that I edit, and one of the things you'll see sometimes, especially in fantasy or sci-fi books, is that you get a little of an overload sometimes in the first start of the story as you get the world explained to you in sometimes exhausting detail. And that's because when you are doing a science fiction or fantasy world, you have to, as a writer, you have to spend a lot of time mapping your world out, how it is organized, what the rules are, where the towns are, things like that. And you spend an incredible amount of time on this, and naturally you start writing the story after you've done all this, and boy, you want to share everything with everybody.
Yes.
And Teiran makes the smart choice here in that he obviously has all this in his head or a notebook somewhere, but he is only sharing us what we need to know for the story. And not just that,
it's very
but he's sharing it
out as well.
Yeah, exactly. He's sharing it when we need to know it. So
the opening scene, for example, introduces us to all the major characters, gives us their name, their species, the general details, and kind of a specific thing about them, what their specialty is. So we know that Roland's kind of the leader of the group. We know Boris is the muscle, Gina does the magic, Brian is the technical specialist, and Richard's the I guess the second arm of the muscle. You want the chrome, the chrome arm of the muscle.
Right,
say that. Yeah. And we get a very good impression of just the thing they do because they're carrying out a mission to go in and get this chip, which then gracefully leads into the next scene, this meeting with the Ryan Clark, Mr. Johnson, the panda, which allows Teiran to set up the exposition for the next scene, which will be the climactic battle.
Right.
So it's very gracefully plotted out. It doesn't get very laborious. It doesn't get very bogged down in details. It just brings these things up gracefully as they need to be covered. And that's, I think, how a good thriller is supposed to be.
Exactly.
A nice thrilling story is supposed to be able to carry you straight through it. You're not supposed to make some tremendous revelation at the beginning. You're not supposed to be filled with some tremendous emotional longing.
You shouldn't need to feel like you need to read a manual at the start of the story, too, which is how some fantasy books can be. It's, okay, here's the whole and people even actually do this on purpose, which drives me crazy, where a history of the world by blah, 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 and you basically have to read this little primer on how the world works. I'm sorry, it sucks. Take me right into the story. As I'm reading the story, I should learn what I need to know about how the world works.
I've been trying to get into fantasy recently. You were completely turning me off of this. You're not even trying.
No, fantasy's great.
You're not even trying.
Fantasy's great.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I just got all these awful things about fantasy from you.
No. Bad fantasy is really bad. I think
that's bad Pokemon stories.
That's the thing. Oh, okay. Well, I want to get to that at the end. But yes, I do have a Pokemon.
Oh my goodness.
Related event.
Yeah, he told me about this earlier. He's trying to hurt himself. But I guess he'll tell you about that later.
I think one of the key points and one of the key world revealing moments here is towards the end, and the whole ambulance or the events surrounding the ambulance.
The EMTs have guns, and apparently they're like,
there you go.
And you don't fuck with them either.
Yeah,
because they will fuck with you. Apparently,
right.
These EMTs.
Right.
I mean, these even who was it that was completely worried of them? It was Boris. Mm-hmm. He was bleeding out. He's like, you don't mess with these EMTs.
Right, because they will shoot you. Yeah, and they approach them with their guns out and everything. But there's this, just in their interaction, without Teiran telling us explicitly how the world works, we can infer a hell of a lot from how the world and society works from that scene. And know what kind of economy we're living in. So,
and where do they even go to have this tremendous scene? It's this warehouse where all they do is shuffle things around.
Yeah,
there's no
nothing is made there.
There's no industry.
Right.
It reminds me much more like a data port, like a server in a internet complex, than it does an actual center of industry.
Right.
Because they're just taking these packages and moving them from place to place. And what kind of economy arises from that?
Let me put on my anthropologist hat, and I'd say this absolutely typifies what's known as the post-Fordist economy, and that's in terms of Henry Ford. And the Fordist economy, which is what we had, at least up through the 50s and 60s probably, is typified by centralized productions like Henry Ford's River Rouge plant, where you literally took iron and coal in one end of the factory and sand and rubber and things like that, and literally the other end you rolled cars out. And everything was done there.
After there was everything
an agreement, right? Everything was brought to the site, and because the site was there and you'd invested all this infrastructure and time, the workers were part of the community, had a close relationship, had collective power, because you put all this infrastructure investment in there. The government played a role in things because it was located there. The post-Fordist economy... It built cities, essentially. Yes,
it built cities.
Exactly. The post-Fordist economy, that's the world we live in now. It's the world of what Iowa Ong calls flexible accumulation. That goods and services and ideas are assembled piecemeal from everywhere, wherever the costs are lowest, and they're put together. So, if you're building a jet engine, you may get this part from company A. If next week company B has it for sale for cheaper, you will order from them. And we get it from, 50 different countries. And if it gets expensive to build things in China, you'll move the factory to Vietnam. Those workers can't move. Capital can move. People still can't, because people still have to pay attention to national borders.
When it's centralized, it benefits the things that are centralized, like people. When it's decentralized, it benefits the things that are decentralized.
Like capital.
Like capital.
Yeah.
Precisely. It reminds me of the rant that Bernie Sanders was going on in his filibuster, which is, by the way, coming out as a book sometime soon. I'm going to be getting that on my little nook. But he was talking about, I believe it was GE, had these factories they would just put on barges, and they would just ship them up along the Asian coast to whichever city offered the cheapest labor at that point. So,
and this is obviously a hyper-capitalized world, ambulances, when you already see hints of this, that sometimes hospitals will turn people away if they don't have the right insurance. And so already seeing these things, and I think Teiran's carrying it to this horrible but logical conclusion, that, ambulances will not help people unless they have, this very specific, kind of ambulance plan.
And if they don't have the ability to refuse service.
And that businesses are territories, because notice that too, the ambulances could not cross into the warehouse, or couldn't even pull somebody out of the warehouse because it functions as a territory. So clearly we've seen, I think, too, that corporations have probably supplanted national governments as the major authority or structures in people's lives because apparently their property is treated as sovereign.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
who
it's
needed the
definitely
government
a
anyway?
dystopia.
I never used the trains.
Hey, they're working on it right now. One thing I think that Teiran makes a good choice of, too, or something that I've noticed in other stories, is I think it's important that these characters are mercenaries rather than soldiers.
Well, if there's no government, there is no military.
Right. Or the government's, in fact, we don't even see... I mean, for all we know, right, there might be no government. Or it might be just corporations, like in Snow Crash, for instance, where we really don't see any hand of government at all.
Really none at all. Only kind of this vague implication of government from maybe outside in terms of like these immigration.
Right.
At we know that Boris is an
illegal immigrant.
Not an illegal immigrant, an undocumented piece of data.
Right. Yes. I
don't know, some bit in the ether, but whatever. But there's only this very vague sense of maybe kind of like national boundaries being kept up, but not in a very strict way.
Yeah, I think Teiran makes a good choice, though, doing mercenaries. And I see a lot of, you see a lot of stories of pirates and mercenaries and things. And part of that's because I think they have this kind of cachet to them, or pirates at least do. But part of it, I think it's very tricky to write convincingly about soldiers, unless you have been a soldier, or unless you've grown up, in a house of soldiers, or unless you've done a heck of a lot of research, because the military is so structured and so organized and so filled with procedures on how to do everything, that if you are writing about soldiers, you better know those procedures up and down for whatever country you're setting in, or even if you're doing like a space kind of futuristic one. If they are military, I think you should know kind of general soldier principles, either from experience or a lot of really careful research, because if it's not convincing,
so you think
that can kill it. I mean, they've got to be really convincing to brush soldiers. Past it.
There's no way to really kind of put in the vague sense just maybe what goes on without having to address the particulars of how they're done. Because I mean, you could probably you can probably suppose maybe the vague arc of a soldier's day, and with a little bit of research, get a vague understanding of how something might happen. That would at least give you the ability to set a scene or a story in some kind of
I think
drawn back or relaxed view. But
no, I agree. I think that you're right. That's a good point. I think depending on the kind of story, I would say if you're doing like life in a barracks, for instance, or if you are doing combat operations, you better know what you're talking about from a soldier's point of view.
They do have some combat in here, but it's from a different perspective completely.
Exactly.
It's much more guerrilla or ambush style.
Right. And because it's not trying to be soldiers, I'm not sitting going, well, is that how they really do it? And I don't catch myself doing that. So I think it's a good choice here. But yeah, I think that's a good point. If I was doing a story about maybe, a soldier and falling in love with somebody, I probably don't need to know as much.
You don't only need to know the vague details, like, they would probably have to be back at the base at this time. They would only have to be blah, 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 blah. But
it's interesting, too, because we're in a time period...
You think pirates didn't have procedures? Pirates must have had procedures, too. I'm sure pirates had, how would you bring up an anchor?
Yeah.
Tell me, how would you bring up an anchor? You're on a pirate ship. Tell me, you're riding a pirate ship. How are you going to cast the sails, whatever that term is?
I'm not pretending to be a pirate.
How are you going to swab the poop deck? Pirates must have... I mean, I just think... I think we might feel that it's more difficult to write soldiers because in our particular contemporary setting, soldiers are important. If you're a United States citizen, you have a very active military.
Except we're at a time period where there are less people being soldiers as a percentage of the population than there have been for most of the century. So it's not a common touchstone.
In terms of foreign policy, it's still a very common image. So as a
but
shared
it's not
image
an
is very common.
experience many of us have had.
That's true. And I do live with many Europeans many of whom have conscription in there, but they don't go to war. When they're talking about the mandatory military service, they're talking about going to a campground and learning to shoot a gun and
but that would
run
I think
around
still be helpful for a lot of things. So I'm not saying go join the reserves so you can be a better writer, but
I'm saying like even these
it wouldn't hurt,
Pirates might be just as difficult to write.
Oh yeah, no, I mean you should.
We're just so detached from them. We're detached from them. We wouldn't know what we were missing.
There are less people who, there are less readers who are potentially an authority on pirates. Exactly. Whereas there's still a good segment of the population that has been a soldier or has grown up in a household of soldiers, and so may read your story. And if you don't know what you're talking about, they're going to see it right away. Pirates, not so much.
If I go down Georgia Avenue, I could walk into either a Pirates-themed bar and get a steen of something, or I could walk into a National Guard office and join the military.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like, okay, different scales here of things you can't really get that involved in being a pirate anymore unless you want to move to Somalia and deal with having oil and lasers thrown at you.
Well, is there anything else we want to talk about with this story? I enjoyed it. I didn't have a favorite line this week, but I had a favorite scene.
Oh, what was your favorite scene?
I think my favorite scene was right towards the end where Boris, there's the wounded, unnamed vixen lying halfway in this doorway. And the ambulance people, because, as we've talked about, there seems to be this territoriality issue that corporations have, where the ambulance people will not even pull her out of the doorway. And Boris, even though he is dying, and at this point, as far as he's concerned, there is no chance the ambulance people will help him. He grabs her and throws her out of the compound. So then they have to help her at that point. And I love it because most of these people are, it's a highly ultra-capitalistic society. Everybody is really, for the most part, in it for themselves in a lot of ways. And this is an absolutely selfless act here. And it really stood out at me in this story for that. In this world where everything is so profit and self-motivated, here is a purely selfless act with no reward, and he did it. And that's, it was like, wow.
And actually, my favorite scene was immediately following that. And I liked it because of the difference it made, where in your scene, it's a very physical, it's a very, real struggle to bring her out of the to be a hero, to bring her out of the building. But then we have Brian, whose heroism comes via PayPal. He just sends a couple $dollars off to the insurance company, and hey, I saved your life too. So hey, we got against the dualism.
And it's also a pretty selfless act. I'll give you that. It's not absolutely, because it's hinted a lot of money, and they talk about that.
If he had that much of a crush on him, shouldn't he have paid for his insurance earlier?
Well, you don't want to cross money. You don't want to cross boundaries here. You wouldn't want anybody uncomfortable. But yeah, that was cute. That obviously there was, had this kind of crush on him, but so it wasn't completely selflessly motivated, but that was pretty close, and so that was nice to see too. And that kind of contrasted me where, there's a scene actually where I realized these weren't really good people for the most part.
How long did it take you?
Right away.
Really?
And I think that was one of the interesting choices that Teiran do, is where they burst into the kind of camera room in the opening scene, and they shoot the guy.
I realized
there is no attempt at all. It is just, and they're still invisible even at that point. Like, he can't even really perceive them, and they just shoot him anyway. There's no attempt to do any kind of way to subdue him or, tase him or anything like that. It says, bam, it is most expedient and easiest to kill him, so that is what they do.
When I realized they were bad people was when they were talking in the line outside the club. That's just rude.
Yeah. But Boris, even after like going through this thing and just mowing down all these people who were the kind of guards on duty, did this selfless act. So, which is an interesting juxtaposition.
I thought they just had to get rid of the character conveniently.
And it
That's
may
what
have been.
It reminds me of this quote by Kurt Vonnegut where he says that we treat others like authors treat the bit characters in their plays.
Yeah.
That's more or less it.
That was actually, I know Kyle Gold
Be kind
had
to
a
your
little
big
journal
characters,
about
writer.
that this week, saying if he was in a bad mood, it was because he was doing terrible things to his characters this week, and he apologized. So, there you go.
Be kinder to your bit characters, everybody. That's all we're saying. Be nice to them.
So
they're not that important in the story. You don't have to be that mean to them.
Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about in the story, or should I throw out my challenge?
I think you should throw out your challenge.
Okay.
I want to just watch you go down.
All right, yeah.
Remember
this
this
may be
moment
good.
when you're crying later on.
I have a challenge, and it is born of frustration of browsing through So Free. I have a challenge to all you writers out there, or readers too, if you've seen one. I would like to read a great Pokemon story.
Why?
And I will preface that by saying that I know almost nothing about Pokemon. I do not know. I know what Pikachu looks like, and that is about the extent of my Pokemon knowledge.
You didn't play red or blue?
No.
But you didn't play gold or green
I
or yellow?
I didn't.
Did you play silver?
No.
Or did you play
I've seen the show a couple times.
Did you play
when I was
Emerald?
younger. No.
Did you play the
Okay.
version...
I give up.
Did you play the cashmere sweater version?
No. There's a cashmere sweater.
Pokemon cashmere sweater is my favorite version of Pokemon.
So, here's the thing, and there are a ton of Pokemon stories on So Furry. And I keep being like, there's gotta be... I think it's this feeling that in all of these Pokemon stories, there has to be a great one. So, this is my challenge to you as readers, if you've seen one, or as writers, if you write me a Pokemon story that is great for even somebody who doesn't know a lot about Pokemon. That's my challenge.
I have a challenge to go along with that.
My big pet peeve with them always is, like, whatever Mon, looks like this, and there's no attempt to describe him because they all assume that everybody knows what a Bulbasaur looks like. I don't. So, write me a story that is great in spite of being a Pokemon story.
I wrote one once. It's impossible. It's impossible to write a good Pokemon story.
I think somebody can do it. So that is my challenge to you.
I have a challenge to
the audience. Yes.
While some of you guys are writing Pokemon stories for Skip, I challenge the rest of you to write good stories and send them to me.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes, if you are a writer, please send us a story.
Skip can have the Pokemon stories, and I can have all the other stories.
If there is a story that you would like featured and read out loud that maybe you've seen, let us know, and we'll try and contact the writer about seeing it on the podcast as well.
Sure,
and
I'd love to.
Lastly, if you are interested in being a reader and reading a story for us, please contact us. Visit at baddogbooks.com/book club, right?
Yeah. And if you want to contact me, I'm at toonses@drivingcat.org.
And I am Skip at baddogbooks.com.
Okay, great.
So,
thanks for coming,
next
everybody.
Week, and one last announcement, next episode, we'll be reading Thou Shalt Not Kill by Fuzzwolf, so another shout out to you Notcasters. First appeared in X in 2009, and our thanks to our friends at Sofa Wolf Press for letting us record it as well.
And don't be put off by the title, it's incredibly pornographic.
And it's excellent.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
You can't read that one if you're not 18 years old, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. All right, that's it for me.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
All right.
It was a great time.
Thanks for coming, and see you next time.
Ciao.